degree programs, and also Professor Matt Noto from the University of Chicago. They'll be presenting Identifying Optimal Ticket Pricing for Professional Sports, the Frontier of Quantitative Analysis Combining Primary and Secondary Market Data. The presentation will also run for 30 minutes, and we'll have a few minutes for Q&A at the end.
Great, so thank you very much. I hope we'll get the slides up there if we can. The first thing I want to say, partly because I'm a professor, is thank you and congratulations to the students at the MIT Sloan School who've been putting on these conferences for 10 years now. It's quite remarkable. So as you can see, our topic is indeed optimal ticket pricing for professional sports. I'm Rob Stavins, a professor over at Harvard. I'm here with Matt Notowidigdo, who's a professor at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. We together are this firm, Sports and Entertainment Analytics. We do a variety of engagements, I should say, within sports analytics, not just ticket price analysis, but revenue sharing analysis. We've done schedule analysis and also ticket holder retention modeling analysis. There are brochures if you want to know more about what we do up here in the front, or just give us a business card afterwards and we'd be happy to be in touch with you. And finally, I do want to mention that our participation here in the MIT Sloan Conference is in cooperation with Charles River Associates, CRA, International Economics and Business Consulting firm that probably many of you are familiar with. So into the substance, I'm going to start by saying a few words about club objectives and how in order to meet club objectives, understanding the true demand for tickets is absolutely essential, and then what the challenges are that presents. So one of the many potential objectives that we find that clubs have is, not surprisingly, to increase revenue and or to increase attendance. This brings up a variety of questions. What are the right relative prices among existing ticket categories? Can revenue be increased by adjusting or actually creating new ticket categories? That would be seating sections within the ballpark or stadium. And then how much can be gained by temporarily differentiating ticket pricing? I'm referring to variable pricing, and I'll come back to dynamic pricing at the very, very end. An additional objective, which it turns out is not inconsistent with objective number one, is improving the quality of ticket services for fans. And this is done by better pricing that reduces price differentiation by the source of the ticket, who you bought it from, and increases price differentiation by the quality of the ticket, by the experience that comes with it. Both of those are obviously very much in the interest of fans. Second, with the work we do, as you'll see, you can address a wide variety of investment questions, whether it's adding new seats, creating new sections, adding amenities, cup holders, or something else. And then finally, understanding the true market value of the assets. The expected present discounted value of the future stream of potential ticket revenues are key components of the true asset value of a professional sports organization. Now, for all of those, in order to meet any of those objectives, it's necessary to have an understanding of the true demand for tickets, by which I mean how much people value specific seats to specific games, how much people value, for that matter, individual attributes of specific seats for specific games. But the true market demand is unknown in advance. And that's simply because face values are administratively set. Face values are not set by supply and demand in the market, with the exception of dynamic, which I'll come back to. And we found that face values, therefore, depart tremendously frequently from actual valuations. In some cases, the market value of tickets is greater than face values. In some cases, is less. But inevitably, it is the case that the true market value varies more than the face value, according to location, according to amenities, according to timing, and lots of other factors that we're going to take a look at together. And we know this from the secondary market. But, and I want to emphasize this, very careful analysis is required to develop reliable estimates of true market demand in the primary market, which is what we care about, and revenue-enhancing prices. In fact, secondary market ticket prices on their own can be very misleading, and I'm going to give you some numerical examples of that. Now, one example, which is public information, this is from press clips, work we did with the NFL's Miami Dolphins. They wanted to help develop a pricing plan that for season tickets and for individual game tickets, we carried out an econometric analysis. This is back when we were doing it through another firm, which is Analysis Group, evaluated demand, and we recommended new approaches to ticket pricing. As a result, according to the press clips, the Dolphins increased ticket prices for 55% of their seats, left prices unchanged for 30% of the seats, and lowered prices for 15% of the seats, and then also created some new seating categories that we recommended. The bottom line was that the analysis helped increase both attendance and revenues. And before I go to the next slide, I noticed 24 people standing in the back. If there's an empty seat next to you, why don't you raise your hand? So there are seats up front. If you'd like to get a box seat, you can get one now. So I'm not going to take you through all of the, or for that matter, any of the testimonials we received. You can find these on our website, but rather I'll just mention that we've done work and have been delighted to do work for many years with the Boston Red Sox, the Oakland Athletics, the San Diego Padres, the Kansas City Royals, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the St. Louis Cardinals, and others that I don't have in the slide deck. And instead, let me just get into the methodology. And then we'll take a look at some output and illustrative results. So this is a very rough schematic of the approach that is taken. At the top, you can see we're combining secondary market sales prices, attributes of the seating, temporal attributes. I'm going to give you examples. They go into econometrically, statistically, what is known as a hedonic price model with which we can find out how the market values, how the fans value specific individual attributes of that ticket in that section for that game. That enables us to then estimate the market demand in the secondary market, but then importantly, we combine that with information from the clubs on pricing and sales in the primary market, and through a proprietary model, we then can estimate market demand and therefore ticket values in the primary market. And a variety of output comes from this kind of analysis, and I'm going to show you examples of that in a moment. So here's an example in the case of Major League Baseball of what is sort of the input data, give you a sense of these attributes I've been referring to. The little red dots would represent a secondary market ticket sale. Those you know, that underestimates the numbers we're talking about. We're talking about 10,000 seats, perhaps for an individual game, a third being on the market often. So with the sales price from the secondary market would go into it, and then location, seating amenities, the seating section, the distance to the field, the distance to home plate, the angle of view, elevation, the viewing pitch of the seats, and other amenities that I didn't have room in the slide to put in. And then a host of temporal attributes. Who is the opponent? What's the day of the week, the time of the game, the expected weather, that is the climate, the expected weather at the time of the sale, playoff contention, and other metrics we've used for team performance. And then there are attributes of the ticket sale itself that are important to control for: the number of seats together, the time from sale to game day, and others. Now, because of time, I'm not going to take you through the whole thing for the other two sports we have here that we've worked with. But for the NFL, again, there would be seat location, seat amenities, temporal attributes, and ticket sales attributes. They're not the same as in Major League Baseball. They're the ones that are relevant in this context. And then likewise for the NBA, seat location, again, different metrics than before, seat amenities, temporal attributes, ticket sales attributes, and then secondary market prices. Now, with all of that, then we're able to carry out an econometric, that is a statistical analysis, and I'm not going to put up any of the equations. What I'm going to try to do is to provide you with a visual sense of what's going into and how the model operates. So here's a very unrealistic example because we've got a $50 price on the secondary market for a field box seat. But if that was the price observed on the secondary market, then what the statistical analysis is essentially doing is allowing us to ascribe what part of that, what's the marginal implicit price, what part of that is due to the fact that it's a field box seat, what part of that is due to the fact, in addition, that it's behind home plate, or perhaps relative to what the norm was, maybe this was based on a Thursday night. A Tuesday night might actually be a negative attribute in terms of pricing because there are obviously positive and negative attributes. And then finally, was it a prime opponent? That together would add up to the $50 ticket. That's the decomposition. But it is a very simple stylized example in several ways, so let me explain that. These are categorical variables. You're either field box or not. That's not what we use. We use a tremendous number of continuous variables. Remember, it's the distance to home plate. It's the weather. It's not just zeros and ones. They're continuous variables. Secondly, we don't just use 4 variables as I have in that example. We use a very large number of variables, and you got a sense of that from the pictures of the ballparks and stadiums. Also, this shows these as being linearly additive, but they're not, because being behind home plate is not worth the same amount to the fan if they're in a field box as opposed to the upper grandstand. There are going to be differences. So these are interactive, they're multiplicative. So we don't use a simple linear model, but rather one which is vastly more robust than that. So we view, therefore, how each of the attributes contributes to the contribution of the other attributes. And then finally, our model allows some of the attributes and the effects of all of the attributes to vary dynamically up until game time. So that interacts as well. Now, the important part, the interesting part really, is moving from the secondary market to the primary market, since our ultimate purpose for most clubs is not just for them to understand the secondary market, although that's desirable, but to use this as input into understanding the primary market. The buyers on the secondary market are not necessarily and probably are not representative of the larger fan base. You can picture a number of the reasons why. So what we do is incorporate additional information from the team, the primary market data, and then use this proprietary methodology, in fact, to integrate to actually directly estimate the true value, that is the market demand in the primary market. So let me give you an example, and this will also illustrate why I said the secondary market prices on their own can be misleading. So here's a stylized example, which is a ticket category called Section A. In Section A, there is a face value on the market of $40. Well, it turns out there's excess demand, and therefore the secondary market sample average might be $185. That ratio is not unheard of, by the way, although I'm not saying it's typical. Once we then use the hedonic model to correct for the fact that, well, maybe it was the games against the most desirable opponents. Those are the ones that were dominating the secondary market, and we correct for that, as well as correcting for 35 other variables that are special to the secondary market. We get what we're calling here the regression adjusted value, which is lower, $120. And then through this last step of combining with the primary market data from the team, we get the actual demand, and in this case we're just calling it a point on demand, the market value, in the primary market, which you'll see is $70. So is $70 greater than $40? Yes. So this is an example where there was excess demand and the market value, what we call a market clearing price, was greater, but the $185 would be grossly misleading. Now, it doesn't always necessarily go that direction. Here's Section B, a very high-priced section, which it turns out season ticket holders may have been dumping the tickets because the secondary market average price was only $120. But they were dumping the tickets for the least desirable games. So the regression-adjusted value comes up to $160, and then taking into account primary market data, we have $175 primary market ticket value. So that's our, a very quick overview of the basic methodology. Let's turn to outputs and then some illustrative results, which will be limited only, I hope you understand, because of confidentiality requirements. So the first thing to say is that our reports include 50 pages of detailed numerical results. So this is, as you can see, a redacted version of a cover page and a table of contents. One of the things we look at, and the phrase you'll see here, is market clearing price. Market clearing price is simply an index of demand. It's one point on a demand curve. It's the point on the demand curve where the section would sell out, essentially. It is nothing more than an index. What we actually do, but I can't put up on every slide or every table, is we estimate the full demand curve and that's going to be for every section for each, in the case of Major League Baseball, each of 81 home games. But we are looking here at simply a single point of the demand curve, the market clearing price. And what you see is that the face values of many sections are above market clearing price. That is, in terms of this one criteria, they're overpriced. There might be other reasons why the prices are set that way, accept. But even at that, we're looking here at price differences in these two flags. So you'll see that there are great differences across sections. Some sections are more overpriced than others, either in percentage terms or absolute dollars. At the same time, there's a mix of underpricing and overpricing. So there are a whole set of sections for which the market clearing price is actually more than face value. But what's important in our analysis is that this is only giving points on a demand curve. It doesn't tell us much about the revenue and the attendance significance of it, because of the fact that even modest percentage price changes in large capacity sections can obviously have very significant revenue implications. So what we carry out really is a quantitative analysis of attendance and revenue trade-offs. So we examine a wide range of price scenarios. What are the implications of those? Across the board price changes, selected price reductions in order to hit specific attendance targets that the club may specify, selected price increases to hit revenue targets that the club may specify, and then importantly, adjustments of price ratios among existing ticket categories. A big part of our work, however, is spatial refinement of the stadium or ballpark, improving the boundaries of existing sections based on market demand, creating new sections, which is frequently part of this, for better price differentiation, and in some cases, it could be consolidating sections. Then we also examine potential improvements in variable pricing. We identify, in a method I'm going to show you in a moment, both the optimal number of price tiers, price buckets to use the following season, and also then carry out a segmentation of in the case of MLB, the 81 home games into those price tiers or the existing price tiers if the club wishes to stick with its own. We also examine season ticket pricing that we'll talk about in a moment as well. So again, I apologize, these are terribly redacted, but we look at market clearing price estimates for every existing section. We look at attendance and revenue impacts of price changes, and again, section by section, and look at, again, what it takes to achieve attendance targets, different kinds of premium game pricing, on and on. In addition to presenting all the information to the clubs numerically, we found that they find it exceptionally helpful to receive it visually. So we produce ballpark stadium heat maps that visually compare, for example, face values to prices implied by the market analysis, where the darkest red might mean tickets overpriced, the brightest green might mean underpriced. I can't show you a redacted example since I'd have to hide the ballpark or stadium. You'd probably know which one it is if I didn't. So we found that these are extremely helpful from the perspectives of the organizations we've had the joy of working with. Now, in terms of identifying the best price tiers for the next season, I'm going to say a bit more here about our approach. What we do is we compute the weighted average market clearing price across, I'll take the example of Major League Baseball, across the whole ballpark as a demand index, do it separately for the 81 games. Then, in an additional statistical analysis, ask how does that market clearing price in this season or the season just passed, how was that a function of the opponent, the part of the season, the holidays, days of the week, day-night games, other temporal attributes. And then with that, with information of next year's calendar, and it could be the very preliminary calendar that comes out first from MLB, together with any other information the club has, such as promotions that they're going to hold on specific dates, combine the equation that's been estimated in order to predict the market clearing prices, the demand index, for all 81 games next year. And then, as I'll show you visually, we consolidate that into what's called a histogram, and that tells us the number of games at various levels of demand. And here's an example of one. This was for 2015, market clearing prices being predicted from 2014, as I recall. And what you can see is that it's not unimodal. There isn't a single mode. There are a whole bunch of modes. And this is quite typical. And what's leaping out from the page is the fact that there are some obvious sets of buckets. There are games that are more homogeneous among one another, and there's more heterogeneity from one bucket, from one group of games to another. So this one, for example, suggested 5 pricing tiers. We've colored them here from the most desirable. The outlier, of course, to the far right is opening day, as it typically is. But this can also be used, as some clubs have, for their own tiers that they would like to use rather than the number that we would recommend. And I'm going to turn to Matt.
Okay. Great, thanks. I'm going to talk about 2 more things and then turn it over to Rob to conclude. We've also used the statistical model that Rob summarized to look at the effect of promotions. The way I like to motivate this is with the Wall Street Journal article that we came across that tried to estimate the effect of bobblehead dolls being given away at baseball games on attendance, and they reported attendance effects as high as 40 to 50% for this particular Ken Griffey Jr. doll. That should strike you, I hope, as somewhat unreasonable. But what we've tried to do is use our statistical model to come up with credible estimates of how much attendance is being driven by different types of promotions. Bobbleheads is an example, but there's other promotions that Major League Baseball teams have used, such as giving away free jerseys or other such promotions. And so what we do is, once we have the demand index that Rob described decomposed into the game's attributes, we can then say what would be the counterfactual attendance that would have happened had you not given away the bobblehead. And what we find, I mean, it varies from team to team, we end up with attendance increases that seem, well, much less than that Wall Street Journal article, but still significant relative to the cost of many of these types of promotions. It's not that expensive to give away a bobblehead doll. So in Club A, for example, here, we found attendance increases on the order of 10 to 15% for their bobblehead dolls and other promotions. In Club B, we found something similar. And we can do this for all the different types of promotions that the club's done by leveraging the past historical data that we can use to figure out what's a good, credible estimate of what attendance would have been in the absence of the promotion. I mean, the way I like to think about it is that, you know, in the case of the Ken Griffey Jr. doll here, it was given away on Saturday, August 10th. Well, that's more than a typical Saturday, but attendance in August is often a lot higher than a typical Saturday, right? So those are the kinds of factors that we want our statistical model to be able to account for when we're constructing that counterfactual attendance estimate. Okay. So the second thing I want to talk about is thinking about season ticket prices alongside individual game prices. This is another thing that we found our statistical model is useful for, which is figuring out the appropriate gaps between individual single game prices and season ticket prices. So what I say here at the top is that, you know, doing this directly from the secondary market's infeasible because you don't see people selling their entire 81-game season ticket package on the secondary market. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to build up a estimate of the season ticket package from the demand that we estimate for each of the individual single games, and then figure out what's an appropriate gap between the season ticket package and the single game prices. And what we find is that those gaps often depend on the section, and depend on the section in a way that depends on what we're estimating the demand is from the secondary market. The one thing I want to say that we've also done with secondary market data is estimate the demand for postseason tickets. And in some sports, such as in Major League Baseball, that's useful because season ticket holders have an option. They have the right but not the obligation to buy season tickets if the team makes the postseason. And so by taking secondary market data from the postseason, we can use that to estimate the option value of owning a season ticket package. And we found that's also been useful for teams when they're thinking about pricing their season ticket packages, because then they can think about that option value component, which again may vary by section in a way that we can recover from the secondary market data. Okay, so I'll turn it back over to Rob to conclude.
So we're both watching the clock, and so we're both speaking quickly. Matt probably not as fast as I was, but I just want to reemphasize what he just said, which is that may have gone by quickly. And that is that by carrying out the analysis of the postseason behavior in the market, we can actually estimate what's the option value that season ticket holders have when they're buying their regular season tickets. It can be for some teams, and you can picture which clubs this would be, both in NFL, NBA, and also in Major League Baseball, an extremely important component of appropriate season ticket pricing. So I'm going to conclude with just a few comments. The first is, I said I was going to offer a few words on dynamic pricing. The preseason pricing improvements that we're talking about, getting both season ticket prices right, getting the individual game ticket prices right, the prices right for various bundles of tickets, 10, 20 game packages, all of that we've worked on, are not a substitute for the use of dynamic pricing during the season. And likewise, dynamic pricing is not a substitute for smart preseason pricing. In fact, if you're relying on dynamic pricing to a breathtaking degree on a regular basis, it means something's wrong with the primary ticket pricing at the beginning of the season. So the reason is for saying this is that dynamic pricing should really be employed to change ticket prices in response to unanticipated changes in demand. Not for anticipated levels of demand, but unanticipated changes in demand. That's what dynamic pricing is effective for. Prices obviously can be adapted in real time if and when demand changes, often at the last moment, due to changing factors, team record, player status, or the weather, but not the climate, the actual weather. So our view is that dynamic ticket pricing and smart basic ticket pricing, including variable pricing across the season, are not substitutes. They really are complementary policies. The best dynamic ticket pricing that we've seen, and we've worked with many clubs now, will build on smart basic ticket pricing. Again, because it's best used to address those real-time changes in ticket demand rather than an ongoing attempt to correct for poor primary pricing, and sometimes cannibalizing one's own sales at lower prices as a result. Otherwise, what sometimes happens is that dynamic pricing can actually introduce perverse incentives for fans. So, in fact, improving basic ticket pricing can reduce the need for dynamic pricing and the uncertainty that it can introduce. But again, our purpose is not to slam dynamic pricing at all. So to conclude, I just want to emphasize that secondary market data, which is part of the input for this analysis that we do, is importantly combined with primary market data, and that together they can be very helpful for improving ticket pricing, but very careful analysis is essential. Proper analysis can lead to better pricing strategies, which, as I said at the very, very beginning, I would argue improves both fan experience and team revenues. The way I personally got into this work is as a season ticket holder for Major League Baseball and frustration over the ticket pricing, and I think I'm better off as a season ticket holder and a fan as a result of better ticket pricing. I've observed it firsthand, I can tell you. So it does improve both fan experience and team revenues. The other thing to say is that, I can't show you everything that's confidential, unfortunately, but our analyses produce actionable results, not theory. The clubs have used these actionable results to take actions to improve their pricing strategies, both spatially within the ballpark or stadium and temporally across the season. So with that, I will say thank you very much. Now, we have time, I think, for maybe one or two questions. We have a minute and a half. However, if we run out of time or you're leaving, I just want to remind you, there's a brochure up front, there's a stack here, or if you'd like to talk, when we run out of time here, out in the hallway, or give us a business card, we'll follow up. With that, any questions? Sir, you're the first one I saw.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. So this is it's an econometric model. Is that what you mean?
Oh, hedonic. It's a hedonic regression model. No, it's going to be ordinary least squares regression with hedonic attributes.